Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This video uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today we're diving deep into Mortimer J. Adler's 10 philosophical mistakes. Get ready to uncover how some seemingly small errors in our thinking can have a massive impact on how we view ourselves and the world. Things like free will, happiness, human nature, big stuff.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect. One philosophical misstep, and you can end up with a whole cascade of misunderstandings.
So true. Okay, so Adler kicks things off with this concept of consciousness and its objects. He's specifically tackling Locke's theory here. Can you break that down for us a bit?
Well, Locke believed that we only directly experience our own ideas, not the actual external world itself. Like we're trapped in our own minds, interacting only with these representations of things, not the things themselves.
So then how does Adler challenge that idea? It seems kind of intuitive at first. Like, yeah, of course we experience our own thoughts.
Right. But Adler points out that if Locke was right, then there's no way we'd all be able to agree on anything. So imagine you and I are looking at a tree. We can both describe its size, shape, color. We can even argue about whether or not it needs pruning. That shared experience we're having right there suggests the tree exists outside of our individual minds. It's not just an idea floating around in each of our heads.
Right, we're both tapping into the same reality, not just our own personal interpretations. Okay, this makes me think about how we form abstract ideas. Does that tie into the second mistake Adler talks about, the one about the intellect and the senses?
Absolutely. It's all about whether our minds are just a bunch of sensations or if there's a separate faculty of the intellect that can grasp concepts that go way beyond what our senses pick up. Think about things like justice or infinity or even the concept of dogness. You can't see or touch those things, but we can still reason about them.
So we're not just passively taking in sensory information. We're actively processing it. We're categorizing it, creating meaning with our intellects.
Yeah.
Makes you realize there's a lot more to the mind than meets the eye, literally.
Exactly.
So the third mistake dives into language.
Yeah.
Specifically, this problem of words and their meanings. This is where nominalism comes in, right?
Yeah.
I've heard that term before. But honestly, it always sounded a little intimidating to me.
Well, nominalism basically claims that words are just these arbitrary labels. Like they have no real connection to general concepts. It's like saying the word cat is just the sound we make. It doesn't point to any real essence of catness that all cats share.
But if words are just random labels, how do we even communicate or understand each other? How do we learn new things or build on existing knowledge if there's no real meaning behind the words?
That's exactly what Adler argues against. He says if nominalism was true, then learning a language would be impossible. Think about it when a kid learns the word dog. They don't just associate it with one specific dog, they get it as a category. It includes all sorts of different dogs. That suggests that we can grasp these universals, these shared essences that make language meaningful.
Right. There has to be some deeper connection between the word and the concept. It's not just a random association. Okay, mistake number 4. This one tackles knowledge and opinion. We've got some heavy hitters here, like Hume and Kant. I'm starting to feel like I'm back in a college philosophy class.
Don't worry, we'll keep it approachable. Essentially, Hume argued that true knowledge is limited to what we can observe through our senses and through math. Anything else, particularly things like ethics and metaphysics, he considered mere opinion.
So basically, he's saying there's no real right or wrong, just different perspectives.
I mean, it's a bit of a simplification, but yeah, that's the gist of it. Now, Kant comes in and he's like, hold on a second. There's this other type of knowledge, what he calls synthetic a priori knowledge.
Synthetic a priori. Okay, that sounds pretty complex.
It's basically knowledge that isn't based on experience, but is still about the world. Like, think about the rules of logic or math. These truths seem to be built into how we think. They're not dependent on any specific observations.
Oh, so it's not like I learned that 2 + 2 = 4 by counting apples or something. It's just something I inherently understand about numbers.
Exactly. Now, Adler actually disagrees with both of them. He sees knowledge as this spectrum that ranges from self-evident truths to well-supported opinions based on reason and evidence.
So he's not saying that all opinions are worthless. He's just saying there's a hierarchy. Some opinions hold more weight than others.
Exactly. And the key is learning to tell the difference between those well-founded opinions and the ones that are just mere opinions without any real grounding.
Okay, so far we've covered consciousness, intellect, language, and knowledge. What's next on Adler's list of philosophical mistakes?
Well, let's dive into something that often sparks a lot of debate: moral values. This fifth mistake centers around the belief that morals are subjective, just personal preferences with no real objective right or wrong.
Interesting. So we're getting into the idea that morality is just like a matter of opinion. that there's no real good or bad, just different viewpoints, that seems like it could lead to some chaos.
It's a common belief these days, but Adler argues that it leads to all sorts of problems. He points to Spinoza as an example. Spinoza was a philosopher who believed that good is simply whatever a person desires.
But just because you want something doesn't automatically make it good.
Right.
Right? Like, I might really want that extra slice of cake, but that doesn't mean it's actually good for me.
Exactly. Adler says we need to distinguish between wants, which are often fleeting and kind of whimsical, and needs, which are essential for human well-being. He says true moral values are rooted in these genuine needs, not just random desires.
Right? So it's like this compass that helps us move towards what's truly beneficial for ourselves and for others. This actually makes me think about happiness. Is that connected to this whole morality thing?
You're right on track. The sixth mistake Adler tackles is this confusion between happiness and contentment. A lot of people think they're the same thing, that happiness is all about just feeling good or getting what you want.
Oh yeah, I can totally relate to that. It's easy to get caught up in chasing those quick bursts of pleasure or satisfaction.
For sure, but Adler argues that true happiness goes much deeper than that. He sees it as the quality of a whole life lived well, a life that's guided by those moral values we were talking about, a life that genuinely fulfills our deepest human needs.
So it's not about instant gratification. It's about aligning your life with what's truly good and meaningful over the long haul. I really like that perspective. It feels a lot more fulfilling than just chasing temporary highs. Okay, let's move on to mistake number 7. This one's about freedom of choice. I can already feel my brain getting a workout here.
This is one of those big philosophical questions that's been around for centuries. Do we truly have free will, or are our choices already predetermined?
Right. I mean, on one hand, it feels like we're constantly making decisions, but then you hear about things like genetics and our environment, and it makes you wonder how much control we really have.
Yeah. The determinist view, as Adler explains it, is that every choice we make is basically the inevitable outcome of things that have already happened. It's like a chain of events that's already set in motion.
So there's no room for free will in that picture.
Not really, but Adler points out that even if determinism is true, it doesn't negate our experience of making choices. Like, even if our actions are ultimately predetermined, we still have to go through that process of thinking things through and making decisions.
So maybe it's less about whether our choices are truly free and more about understanding that even with limitations, we still have a role in shaping our lives. Okay, on to the next mistake, number 8. This one deals with human nature, or maybe the lack of it.
Exactly. Some people argue that because humans are so diverse in their behavior, there's no such thing as a fixed human nature.
Yeah, I can see where they're coming from. With so many cultures, personalities, and experiences, it's hard to imagine there's one set of traits that defines us all.
Adler agrees that we are diverse, but he believes there's a common thread that runs through us all. He defines human nature not as a list of specific traits, but as a set of potentialities. Basically, capacities that we all share for things like language, thought, and social interaction.
So it's like we all have the same basic building blocks, but how those blocks are arranged and expressed is what creates all the variety we see in humanity. It's like we all have the same set of Legos, but we can build totally different things with them.
Exactly. Now, moving on to mistake number 9, this one gets into political philosophy a bit. Adler tackles the social contract theory, which is this popular idea about how societies are formed.
Okay, refresh my memory on that one.
Right.
What's the social contract theory all about?
Thinkers like Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau argued that society is basically based on a contract. It's this deliberate agreement that people make to leave a state of nature and create a government for their mutual benefit.
Oh, so it's like we were all just doing our own thing, and then we realized it would be better to team up and create some rules.
That's the basic idea, but Adler argues that this whole state of nature concept is actually a myth. He says humans are naturally social creatures, and societies develop organically out of our need for connection and cooperation. It's not some calculated contract.
So like we're hardwired for community, and societies emerge naturally from that inherent drive. Makes sense to me.
Right, and this leads us to the 10th and final mistake, which brings us back to the realm of forms and universals.
Okay, remind me what those are all about again. We touched on them earlier when we were talking about language, right?
Exactly. This 10th mistake is the belief that because modern science, especially atomic physics, seems to reduce everything to particles and energy, we no longer need the idea of forms or essences.
So it's like, why even bother with the concept of treeness when you can just talk about the specific arrangement of atoms that make up a tree? It's all just matter in motion, right?
That's the view that Adler is pushing back against. He argues that while the particles are real, they exist in a different way when they're part of a whole. He uses the term virtual existence to describe this.
So it's not just about the parts, it's about how those parts come together to create something that's more than just the sum of its parts. Like a cake is more than just flour, eggs, and sugar.
Exactly. Adler's saying that we need to acknowledge both the reality of the parts and the reality of the wholes. We can't just reduce everything to its smallest components and assume we fully understand it.
So he's advocating for a more holistic view of reality, one that recognizes both the material building blocks and also these emergent properties that arise when those blocks interact. It's like recognizing the beauty and complexity of a symphony, not just the individual notes played by the instruments.
That's a fantastic way to put it. That's a great way to put it.
Wow. As we wrap up our exploration of these 10 philosophical mistakes, I'm curious, what are your thoughts? What stands out to you from our conversation?
That's a great question. I think it's fascinating how these big philosophical ideas that seem kind of abstract at first are actually so relevant to our daily lives. We've covered everything from how we understand the world to how we make choices to what it even means to be happy.
Right, and it all comes back to these fundamental errors in thinking, like those little glitches in our mental software. It's kind of like Adler's giving us a mental toolkit to navigate the world and avoid those pitfalls.
Exactly. And one of the things I appreciate most about Adler's approach is his emphasis on critical thinking and questioning assumptions. In today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information from all sides, it's so easy to just accept whatever sounds good or fits with what we already believe.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's almost like a reflex to just go along with what everyone else is saying or doing. But Adler reminds us to take a step back, to slow down and really examine the logic behind the ideas we encounter, and to be willing to change our minds when we come across better arguments.
That's so crucial, especially in a time when we see so much misinformation and bias out there. It's like he's giving us the tools to become more discerning thinkers, not just passively absorbing information, but actively engaging with it and forming our own informed opinions.
And that's so empowering, because when we learn to think critically, we not only become more knowledgeable, but we also take ownership of our beliefs and our actions.
I totally agree. It's about becoming more aware of our own biases and being willing to challenge our own perspectives.
This deep dive is giving me so much to think about. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of the relevance and power of philosophy.
That's fantastic to hear. Philosophy often gets this reputation for being intimidating or irrelevant, but it's really all about asking these fundamental questions. It's about seeking a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us, and it's something we can all participate in no matter our background or expertise.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we wrap up, is there one key takeaway that you hope listeners will remember from our exploration of Adler's ideas?
If I had to pick just one, I'd say it's this. Don't be afraid to challenge your assumptions, to really dig beneath the surface of things, and to never stop questioning.
Love that. It's a powerful reminder that learning is a lifelong journey. There's always something new to discover. Now, before we go, we want to make sure our viewers know how they can continue this journey of philosophical exploration. If you're intrigued by Adler's ideas and want to dive even deeper, we highly recommend checking out his book, 10 Philosophical Mistakes. You can find a link to purchase it in the show notes. And to stay on this path of mindful inquiry, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you in part 3.
Absolutely.
It makes me think about all the potential we have as humans. If we can avoid these common mistakes and think more clearly, what could we accomplish?
Yeah, that's a great point. If human nature really is about potentiality, like Adler argues, then recognizing and overcoming these philosophical errors could be the key to unlocking even greater possibilities for ourselves.
Like we're upgrading our mental operating systems, getting rid of those bugs and glitches that are holding us back. This has been such an insightful conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to break down these complex philosophical ideas with us.
My pleasure. It's always a treat to discuss these big questions with someone who's genuinely curious and engaged.
And I have to say that I feel like I've learned so much, not just about philosophy itself, but about myself and how I view the world.
That's what philosophy is all about, really.
Yeah.
It's not just about acquiring knowledge. It's about transforming ourselves and how we relate to everything around us.
Well said. And on that note, we want to remind our viewers how they can continue this journey of philosophical exploration. If you found this discussion thought-provoking and you're eager to delve deeper into Adler's ideas, we highly recommend checking out his book, 10 Philosophical Mistakes. You can find a link to purchase it in the show notes below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more insightful content that will nourish your mind on the go. Thanks for joining us today. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those minds sharp.